Hey, Parafam. We want to say thank you from the bottom of our heart for everyone that has been watching our content and who's decided to hit the subscribe and the follow button. We're 8 episodes down. Well, today, for episode 9, we think we got a special one. So enjoy. Hey, Parafam. Here we are yet again for another great episode and another great conversation. As always, it's my pleasure to be here with you. Well, today, our topic is friends, the family we choose. And oh man, to have this conversation, we're bringing in a special guest all the way from Los Angeles, California. Now, this gentleman happens to be one of LA's top-rated photographers. His work has been featured on Forbes, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the NBA, Under Armour, and many more. Now, this gentleman also happens to be a community leader. He's an all-around good man, and I have the pleasure of saying that this gentleman happens to be my best friend. Para, please welcome Brian Keith Freeman Jr. Be Free, what's up, man? Welcome to the pod, bro.
Good, bro.
Hey, man, glad to have you here, man, all the way from LA, man. It's more than a pleasure, man. Glad to have you here with the Para fam, man. As you know, we're having this conversation about friends, the family that you choose, right? And as you know, man, what better friend than Brian Keith Freeman Jr., right? Be Free, right?
What's up?
Hey, man, thanks for joining us in this conversation today, man. So, the people, in our Para fam, don't know, man, that, our relationship has spanned over 20 years, man, 20 years. The time flew by, my boy.
Yeah, got time in.
Oh, yeah, man. Many seasons, many ebbs and flows through our relationship personally, life experiences. We've seen each other through many seasons, man, and it all started, of course, at the illustrious Hampton University,
Your home
real
by the sea.
HU. Yeah, man, it's hard to believe that, we're already, man, 20-something years is already
22.
passed, man.
Over 22.
22 years, man, since we met freshman year on Hampton's campus, man. I remember when we met, it was in University 101. I think
Dr.
it might have
Davies.
been like the very first week,
Yeah. Dr. Davies' class.
Yeah. Dr. Davey, Davey, who ran the honors college, was the person who would introduce freshmen and students to the university, to the culture of the university, the history, and all those types of things. It was mandatory for everyone to take a University 101 class. And man, I think within minutes of coming into that class, first week of school freshman year, man, we met within minutes. And in fact, if I'm remembering right, I'm trying to think if there were many men in the class we were in.
There aren't many men at Hampton, percentage-wise.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh
But,
yeah, that ratio.
no, there weren't. There, especially not in honors university. There weren't that many of us.
Yeah,
at all.
Yeah, man. So honors University 101, and of the few men that were there, man, we met and we locked in quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And our relationship, took different turns and things like that. And what I want to talk about is like some of the turns that our relationship has taken over the years, but really talk about like what the foundational pillars of a relationship that will span 20 years and be able to stand the test of time and go through the different ebbs and flows of the different seasons requires, like the ingredients, right? And I thought, like, man, as we kind of tell the story of how we've built our relationship in the different seasons we've gone through collectively, and even individually, but how we've been able to stand with each other through those collective and individual turns. Oh man, there's a lot of nuggets and jewels on the inside of it, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. So I think I already laid the foundations of, us meeting in University 101. And I think we became cool. And just, I think when we first met, we were catching up pretty frequently and getting to know each other pretty quickly. I think some nuances in our background made us connect very easily, man. We found that a lot of our principles and our standards and a lot of our, just belief systems aligned, right? And but I know there were some key moments in our relationship that really deepened it even more. But when you think back, to some of the initial key elements of us first meeting and what made us connect and all that type of stuff. What are some of the key things that came to your mind, man?
Well, I had just so I had just got saved at 18.
Mm,
So not long before that, I had just had this new experience with God that clearly, changed my life. And not knowing too many people who could understand what that looks like, and you have been walking with God much longer than me at that point. And also, um, for me, I didn't exactly fit like the church context world. It didn't, because I was trying to figure myself out during that time period. It was just like, man, where do I fit? Like
yeah,
I just knew I was like, I didn't exactly fit with like the church kids. Like it didn't exactly work, right? Um, so I tried my hand at kicking it with the church kids. Especially at Hampton, that was a little weird, to be honest with you.
oh yeah,
Yeah. That was a little weird. You got your, tambourine playing, like, like that's not exactly my faux pas.
yeah,
But yeah, man, like I didn't really have too many people that I could understand the spiritual, like, space that I was currently in at that time. That was very much so, in retrospect, it was very much so new to me.
yeah,
So I just remember just being on campus, having different conversations with different people, and not not always connecting the way that I wanted to connect, you know?
right,
So when I met you, it was like, oh shoot, he understands like what I'm talking about, or some of the right. And then also you
yeah,
gotta think about it's college, right? So you
hmm,
kind of trying to figure out what direction to go. And I understood me. Um, I would go back to the old life that I was living before if I didn't find people quickly who had similar belief systems as me. So
yeah,
when I met you, it was just like, oh shoot, I think I might be all right. I think and I think
yeah,
eventually we found other people as well who express some
right.
of the same belief systems. But yeah, it was very pivotal that I found you when I found you. You know?
Man, what's inside of what you're saying is the relatability on multiple facets of who you were,
Yeah,
even in the midst of transition, right?
yeah.
Because you said, hey, right before we met, you had found God, which is so critical to your personal development and evolution.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a turn and a transition. And I would imagine, there were some friends you had before you found God, right?
Mm-hmm. Of
And
course.
some of those people may not have made it in the turn, right?
No.
But in your transition of further embracing God and maybe losing other people in the turn,
Mm-hmm.
but looking for some newfound friend groups and people who should be
Mm-hmm.
able to connect to you in different ways, your expression of who you are and your authenticity made you say, well, hey, I know, it may seem like because I now have found God, I'm supposed to just be with this particular people group, and this kind of like template of
Mm-hmm.
a person who now believes in God, man. But there's something inside of me that to be my authentic self, although I'm in the midst of transition and change, I'm looking for someone who understands the depth of what I've now committed myself to and can speak to all the facets of it, even understand what it's like to go through this transition and can add value to me and like talk through the nuances and we can exchange and all of that. But I also need this person to have enough life experience and that be packaged in a way that I can kick it with this person, man, and
Mm-hmm.
we can
Mm-hmm.
relate on different facets of life, right?
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah, and that's difficult to find in life in general, let alone if you're making a major step like embracing faith and evolving so
Mm-hmm.
much because your perspectives are being transformed while you're going through that transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you're in the process of collecting the things that you'll in the future kind of anchor yourself to,
Yeah.
right? But you also, although you didn't use the word, and it's so interesting, hearing you reference that when we first met, you were in this transition and then me thinking of some of the things that have transpired as we progressed in our relationship,
Mm-hmm.
you're really referencing looking for someone you can have some elements of accountability to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
100%. 100%.
Because you're saying that, man, it would be so easy for me to go back to where I was, but I need
Mm-hmm.
someone who understand where I am and where I'm trying to go in this walk of faith that I'm trying to do. And they're
Exactly.
going to keep pushing me and encouraging me towards that. And they have the type of depth that they can do that,
Yeah.
but they also have the type of like just love and openness and relatability that they can walk me through my path and where I currently stand. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to try to force me to be something that I'm not, but they're also not going to let me slip back into what I was, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's so
Mm-hmm.
funny. Later in our story, we switch roles
Oh,
in forms of
100%.
accountability.
100%. You want to know
So
what's
that's,
funny? I was thinking about this
yeah,
the other day, like what was going on, like when we met. Like when we
yeah,
met, you were like you were coming out of a situation, you know what I mean? With
yeah,
I forgot her name.
yeah,
Yeah,
man. So
yeah.
let me
Well,
let
I
me go
do
ahead and get
remember her
to.
name. I'm just not gonna say it out loud. But,
Let me go ahead and start telling
but
some of that story.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Matter of fact, I made mention of this story in some of our previous pods when me and my wife were telling our story
yeah,
and how we've came together and things of the sort. And I made mention that coming into college was the first time I had one of my first serious girlfriends
yeah.
and all that type of thing. And I met Brian before I met that girlfriend, right? And those that have been following our content know that I came from a spiritual background. Father, pastor, grew up in church, raised to do ministry, all these different things, and just really have a solid relationship with God, which I did. And but of course, when you get to college, there's all types of things going on. But I was holding strong, initially, right? And then I gained this girlfriend, but I met Brian like almost first week of school, but maybe a few months into freshman year I gained this girlfriend. Loved this girlfriend to death. She too was a Christian, very talented, very gifted person. It was some of the things that drew me to her, right? But through the course of time, as I shared in the pod before, something went awry. Something in the connection, although I loved her and I felt she cared for me, but something just went awry and she made a pivot in the relationship, right? So, to bring this into context with Brian, first I'm locked in, spiritually, and me and Brian meet. So of course we're exchanging, encouraging each other, all the different things, right? And Brian is even kind of hinting at how him newly transitioning into Christendom and his faith, I'm pretty sure there were things he was able to glean from and gain from me having my walk and all that type of stuff and being able to relate and exchange. But then this girlfriend broke up with me like tail end of the freshman year, right? And so that heartbreak opened the door for me to do a little bit of a pivot, on the walk, right? A little
A
tad
little
bit of a
bit.
pivot, right? Just a little bit. And so coming out of that freshman year, going into the summertime of in between freshman and sophomore year, that's when I took a little bit of a pivot. I said, "Oh man, you know what? I'm going to get out here and see what's going on, right?" And I found myself, just entertaining young ladies and just doing a lot of stuff that was not on center.
You was outside.
To
You was outside.
Yeah, I was outside. I was outside for sure, right? And it ended up turning out that me and Brian meet first, and we're both holding each other accountable, and I'm able to bring value and strength to him because he's newly becoming a Christian and different things of the sort. And me having, been walking in the faith for quite some time. But then once I made this pivot and, it was just outside heavy, I came to this point of being like, oh man, I know what I'm doing is not what I should do. And Brian the whole time was like, hey man, come on, man. So what ended up occurring is I contacted B and said, hey B, man, like, man, I know I need to come back, man. But I'm struggling in some ways. So we deepened our relationship of accountability
Yeah.
with each other, right? and say, oh man, let's check in with each other. Let's be transparent and
Mm-hmm.
open. Let's not like keep any secrets, man. Like tell each other like what's really going on with each other, and if we need to pull up on each other, man.
Yeah.
If you're being pulled into something that, it's not to your best interest, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
being lured into some temptations, call me on the spot, on the moment. I'll
Yeah.
pull up, right,
Yeah.
and help you out, man. And I know for me personally, although I knew the standards by which I wanted to live by, I found myself in a season of just not really in alignment with what I knew, and I had gotten deep into things that just didn't align with what I truly knew,
Mm-hmm.
and I was having a hard time coming back to myself. And Brian ended up being like, I mean, really greatest friend in that season. He didn't judge me. He could have said, "Oh man, I thought you were supposed to be, this type of guy and that type of guy. Here you are out there doing X, Y, and Z and such and the third." No, he just held me to who he knew I really was and kept
Mm-hmm.
pointing me towards that, and was like, "I'm gonna be there for you, man." And I've told this story many times that in the seasons that, although I knew in my mind what was right, but I just didn't have the strength in my heart and in my emotions and in my spirit to do all the things I knew what was right. Brian became the accountability for me in my weak areas until I gained the strength for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
then over a season of time, through that level of accountability, I got back to myself like, oh yeah, no, I don't want to give my time and my energy to these things and those things that don't serve who I
Mm-hmm.
really am, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know for me that took our friendship to an even deeper
Yeah.
level very early on, and that became one of the core tenets of our relationship
Mm-hmm.
till today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So first of all, thank you, man. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Thank
you
you,
already
man.
know.
And so that type of accountability and friendship between men, man, oftentimes, can be rare, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is to go to that level of transparency and openness, but also have a person that can see the good of you and the bad of you, right? But
Mm-hmm.
still hold you in high regard and point you to the best version of yourself, man. It's deeply needed, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's a real friend, right? That's a real
Mm-hmm.
friend. So how would you describe like what's the makings of a real friend? Because we have all types of encounters out here. We have associates. We have people we meet in the professional and the
Yeah.
corporate space. We even have people at church. I mean, you mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you became a Christian, so you were encountering people
Mm-hmm.
in the religious space.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily, mean that you felt that these were birds of your feather,
Yeah. No.
right? And that you could flock together with
Mm-hmm.
them, right?
Yeah.
How would you describe like a true friend?
A real friend is born for time of adversity. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's so it's an old African American saying, "You're not my brother." I mean, you're not heavy. You my brother.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that right there? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that right
What's
there.
so interesting? And I want to throw it back to you. I actually have started recently doing some, volunteer work and engagement with a local college here in Atlanta and Georgia. And just recently, before the semester ended, the gentleman who was the originator of that painting that saying comes from came and did a talk with the university. It
Oh
was the
wow,
last event that happened on the campus before they closed for the semester, and the gentleman who coordinated the whole event, I was a special guest of them and
wow.
was able to talk to the artists and everything, and it was a really encouraging thing, man. So yeah, that's right on
The
point. That was the last gathering that I went to at this university.
What's
Yeah.
deep about that is I actually have a picture of it. Like every kid that grew up in the if you was born in the 80s and you was raised in the 90s, breakdance was like a big thing, right? So
Yeah.
I was big on. I've always been like a huge hip hop head, but even as a little kid, like breakdancing and stuff was like a big thing for me as a little kid. They called me trying to break my neck, but I have a picture of me dancing with that shirt of that painting on.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's real wild that you said that. because I
I
saw
actually
that.
think I remember that shirt, man. I think I've seen that
You
shirt
probably, yeah, you
many
probably seen a
times.
picture of
Yeah,
me with that shirt
yeah,
on. Yeah. But yeah, man, like a brother is born for times of adversity. Like I think a lot of times people think that they have friends, like they think that they have friends,
hmm
but they don't know if those people are truly friends until really tough times hit. The other thing is that's one. Um, what I don't think we failed to say it, but we were extremely honest with each other,
yeah,
right? So we
yeah,
called each
yeah.
other out, like, "Hey, bro,
hmm
that's not it." You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure. And
So,
it's not just calling each other out when we're doing things to each other, of
hmm
course, right? But
right
it's also calling things out when you see your brother going down a path that you know doesn't serve who they really are.
there we go.
And you know, the ability to kind of pull their card and say, "Hey bro, like,
That's not it.
hey man, that's not it, bro.
That's not it.
Like, that's the wrong
Yeah.
path for you, man." Yeah.
So, um, the thing that makes me a true friend, um, is when things get shaky, not ignoring what my brother is going through and be able to
Mhm.
say, "Hey, you are not the highest. You're not being the highest version of yourself." The
Right.
Bible says that um, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. And there's been so many times and people that I've called friends in their lives where I've watched so many people around them cheering them during times when they should be using righteous judgment, you know?
Yeah.
Like one
Yeah.
of my favorite scriptures is the scripture that people love to use, which is judge not. But they don't read the whole scripture. That whole scripture is actually an instruction on how to judge properly.
Yeah.
So people get on you like, man, you judging me. But we've judged each other throughout all our entire relationship. And it's the thing
Right.
that's actually made our relationship a real relationship because first we examine the plank within our own eyes,
hmm
right? And then
Yeah.
once we examine that plank within our own eyes, we're able to examine the speck that's in our brother's eye to help our brother eye out because this thing is going to take him out, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah, see, I think the key about that judgment that you're speaking about is what you're judging against, right?
mhm,
I think it's one thing for a person to just have a level of self-righteousness that they think
mhm,
they're just special and amazing and they're therefore looking down on any person. But I think in us meeting early on, we were able to actually see each other through a lens of God, right?
mhm,
And where each other were called to go to
mhm.
and the type of man we were called to be, and we're not judging each other against like you're not this, you're not that, just by our personal standards. We're actually judging each other against the vision of each other that we can see we're headed to and
Exactly.
that we both know of ourselves, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so we constantly are pointing each other to like, nah, this is who you are, bro. You know,
Mhm,
this is who you are. This moment in time doesn't reflect who you are, right? And we say
mhm,
that in multiple ways. It's when we're falling short and we say, nah, that's not it, bro.
mhm.
Who you really are is this.
Yeah.
Or if we're having a moment of weakness and we're feeling down and like, man, we say, nah, man, but that's not who you are, bro.
Yeah.
You're really this, right? So
Mhm,
it's the same voicing anchored
mhm.
on really truly seeing each
Yeah.
other, right? And
Yeah.
really knowing each other, but
Yeah.
knowing each other through a higher standard.
Yeah.
And that's where, faith being a foundational pillar and tenet of what even connected us was so
Exactly.
critical,
Yeah.
because it became something greater than ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And I think really what you're speaking to when people are just applauding each other, it's good to have friends and all that type of stuff. But when there comes a level of just people pleasing that's inside of your relationship, it doesn't really lend to your health, right?
Yeah.
True relationship is about, some type of integrity
Mhm.
about the morals and the standards and the principles in which you both agree in,
Yeah.
right? And agree on. And ideally, it should transcend into higher vision of each other
Yeah.
and who the people are purposed to be,
Mhm.
and then pointing each other towards those
Yeah.
agreed standards and those agreed that agreed moral compass and
Yeah.
those visions of who you are, man.
Yeah.
And that's what I think has been most powerful about our relationship,
Mhm.
and that has stood the test of time, right?
Mhm.
And that's whether we've had seasons that we weren't clicking
Oh,
or
because
not.
those came. Yeah.
Those came for sure,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, we can always come back to it because that was the foundations
Yeah.
of it, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you know what? Like, I think the perception, like being able to perceive a person is everything. Cause you said seeing through the lens of God, which is everything. And I think what happens is people start aligning themselves with people who can't perceive that person properly. And they don't
Right.
see that person in a distant future, or they don't see they don't see the totality of who that person is.
Right.
So a season will come and they'll place that person in that season. They can't see that person past that season. So sometimes they
Right.
even end up holding you into a season as well.
Yes.
Which
A
is
lot of times people will hold you prisoner to the current version of yourself
yeah,
because you're actually serving a lower version of themselves, right?
exactly.
And they can't stand to see you evolve into the highest version of who you're really purposed to be because they never were looking to see that person. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
many people bond off of trauma
Yeah.
or dysfunction or anything you can name that's their lower self,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so people will bond off of that. And here's what's really underneath it. Well, and a lot of times in those seasons, that person is dishonoring themselves.
Yeah.
So they then hold another person to a version of themselves that is deserving of dishonor.
Yeah.
And then when you make an adjustment and you say, oh man, I'm going to commit myself to a higher version of myself, they don't know how to make the transition to place the honor on the higher
Yeah.
version of you that they need because they never saw you from a lens of honor.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think one of the most powerful components of our relationship is it was built on seeing each other through a lens of
Yeah.
honor and then pushing each other
Yeah.
towards that honor
Yeah.
and holding each
Yeah.
other to that honor
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because I'll say this. I end up going down the path that you had just went down right after you got restored from that path. And I remember you saying, I remember in college you saying, hey B, man, it's like the Matrix. Like it's like you don't want to go out into that world because if you go into that world, there's a whole world that you can't see. And I remember when I stepped into that world, oh my God.
Man.
I remember just being in the space of being like, man, Joe said this, Joe said that, Joe said this, but being so deep in it that I didn't know how to pull myself out of it,
Yeah.
And your voice being your voice being constantly in my mind that this is not the space you want to be in,
Yeah, man. I think the powerful thing too is that although we switched, well, you didn't abandon me in my season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't abandon you too.
Mm-hmm.
And that looks different at times,
Yeah.
right? Meaning, we had to give each other space at times too,
Yeah.
to grow and evolve in our own time.
Mm-hmm.
But because we were committed to the highest versions of each other that we could see, we were always there and available and ready to continue to push each other and point each other towards those higher versions when each other was ready, right?
Yeah.
And so, I had my season, right? And then when you went into your season, I said, oh yeah, he's out there. He's outside for sure. Right?
Yeah.
I said, okay, man, listen, I'm going to give him his space, but I'm always going to be there. I'm not coming from an angle of like judgment and harshness, but I am going to be pushing him towards like, hey bro, hey man, that's not it, man. Hey man, we need, you need this and oh man, that's not gonna work out right there, man. Like I know that looks good, but that's not, that's not gonna work out there, man. That's not gonna lend to your high self. And I'm thankful we were able to see each other through those seasons. And I even feel like some of our dark seasons, being able to walk it together, it strengthened our relationship even
Oh,
more
100%.
and made us able to relate even more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about dark seasons because some people want the dark seasons and their friend is right there with them in the mud, right? You
Yeah.
know, right there in the mud with them, waddling in the mud with them, you know, stuff like that. And that's what makes people feel like someone is truly their friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, you know, our ability to have seasons where, oh man, you were in a space at a time, but I wasn't down there with you, man. I'm
Yeah.
pulling you out of that. I'm
Yep.
pulling you up from it. I was in a space for a while and you're not down there with me, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're pulling me out like, hey, bro,
Exactly.
no, sir, you know, that type of thing. But the relatability on, yeah, the relatability in those seasons, right? And, being able to continue on the journey and continuing encouraging each other to our higher selves in the process, right? And still stand strong. And I think that's the example of your statement about a brother being built for adversity, right? It's when we were going through personal tough times, that brother being there to stand with you and help you through it, right? And not bail on you in the midst of that tough time, but stand consistent and stand strong, you know? Yeah. So also, you know, you talked about us coming together, the foundations being laid about faith and, you know, going to our higher selves and the evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And giving each other wise counsel. Because when you talked about like the voice, well, really, what I hear is the counsel in the voice,
Exactly.
right? Because we have all type of voices in our lives, man. People that speak and people that come with perspectives and things like that. But not all the perspectives are going to serve us, right?
No.
And it's going to help us. It's going to make us our better self. So let's talk about like wise counsel, man.
Yeah.
And how important wise counsel is in the relationships and how we really qualify what's truly a friend based on the counsel, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, let me first say this. What I realized is we actually created a culture,
Yeah.
and it's actually a culture. The culture that we created is actually the culture that I now model and also teach. I serve men here in Los Angeles, and a lot of the work that I do is essentially like rebuilding minds, right? So we all come from a culture. We all come from multiple cultures, right? No matter what city you're from, particularly here in Los Angeles, most people are transplants. So when we come into community, we're coming with multiple mindsets. And with that being said, most of those mindsets lead us in the wrong direction, right?
Yeah.
Because of our friendship and also other friendships that we had around us, because it wasn't just us. There's a culture that's created from that, and because that culture is now like cultivated, you can now remodel that thing, essentially disciple people, you know?
Yeah. Man, listen, let me talk about you, man. I mean, Brian was so instrumental in being a drawer of people, right? And but us having that culture of accountability with each other, it created room for me to really bring a lot of who I am to greater groups of people, right? And so all we did was duplicate the relationship he and I had with about 4, 5, 6, 7 other dudes. And then that grew into more and more people, right? And we became very known for just having great circles of men that encouraged each other and you know, kept each other accountable to who we really were and things like that, man. And we had guys that were impactful and great in their own right, like in so many ways. I mean, these guys have gone off to do so many
Amazing
significant things till today, right? But the health of that community of people right on a college campus, right? And then of course the relationships transcended college, right? And we continued to keep this culture of accountability and encouragement and transparency and all these different things of the
Yeah.
sort. And it was an education too. You
Yeah.
know, we were executing something that we innately had in us to do by what we built in our core relationship, but it became an education as we duplicated this in our extended relationships, and it became a whole community. And as you share, you've been able to take that model of operating and take that as a way that you live in general, and you bring it into communities. I know I've done the same, right? And it's highly impactful, and it really gives you the ability to teach people to build true relationships, true friendships, because if in your friendships, you know, people don't really see you for who you really are, and they're not coming into agreement with who you are, but also coming into agreement with almost a constitution of like morals and ethics and standards that you all are living by and holding each other up. And you got to think about the seasons that you go into. Me and you have spanned it being young and single. We spanned it the girlfriends. We've spanned now being married. Bro, you were present when my first child was born. My wife went into labor, and you were sitting right there and rode with us to the hospital.
Yo, the crazy thing is, I was driving to come and get up with you that day. It was me and Everett, remember? And I was driving just to come and kick it with you. And we came in, I want to say we came and picked you up. And when we came in, you were like, yo, Candace's water just broke. And then I was like, hey, Everett, you got to take my car. And then I jumped in the Jeep with you. And then we went to the hospital, which is just crazy. You know?
Yeah, man. So many critical moments being present, right? Young, single, girlfriends, engagements, marrieds. Now I have kids, right? You know, being able to be in each other's weddings and stuff like that, being groomsmen and things like that, you know. And, you know, we were in Southern Virginia, and then we had a season of both being in DC, right? And then, of course, you know, once I made my move to Atlanta, shortly after you made your move to LA, but we still engage as if we're in the same space. I mean, till today, because of the ability the culture of building community, there are people that I touch and I engage with in LA as if I live there. Right. And you connect me to those people as I do you in my ethos to do that same level of exchange of counsel, the same level of accountability, the same level of encouragement, because we enter relationships by first seeing people through the lens of God and seeing who they really are, right? And then coming into agreement with them about who they really are, and then pushing and encouraging them and even admonishing them at times to stay on path to who they really are, man. How powerful is that, bro?
Yeah, no, it's powerful, man. It's powerful. It's absolutely powerful.
Yeah. I mean, talk about how that you've seen that culture be transformative, not only in the Hampton Roads area that, you know, we were in collegiately, right? But I mean, man, we took that type of culture collectively to Washington, D.C., but then you built your own circles and networks in connection with that same culture in DC. And then now you're in LA doing the same thing. I mean, talk about the consistency of the power and the impact of that culture across these different diverse spaces.
So a commonality that we share is kingdom between the two of us. And it was a constant conversation of essentially, what are you building? We've been talking that conversation since we were extremely young. So I have in my mind that only what you build for Christ will last. It's not your job. It's not your corporation, unless you're building that for Christ. It's none of those things. And it might still be on my Facebook. People are Earth's greatest resource. So I've dedicated my life to people. And the tool I believe that the word says your gift will make room for you. So my gift by trade, I'm a photographer by profession, and I own a production studio here in Los Angeles. But all of those things that I do are simply tools to walk into people's lives.
Right.
And some of that some of that was learned and applied while I was in DC. And that's really kind of where I picked up my trade and when I really started like going hard, doing what I do now.
Yeah.
Along the way of doing that, I ran into some of the most amazing people. I ran into some amazing people. And because Christ lives inside of me, he speaks. So because of that, I've had the amazing opportunity to share Christ and share his teachings with people. And I've seen countless. I mean, yeah, it would be hard to really go back and think of how many people that have been led to Christ, that started their walk with Christ, that reinitiated their walk with Christ, and that also came into community. Um, and thank God I've been able to be part of those communities.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's the things that we learn in college transferred so much. Like I couldn't imagine not having college because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to gain the relationships and to deal with the diverse personality types. And
Right.
man, it's been so impactful because it was in college where I was in an internship that I learned about marketplace ministry. I
Right.
was working at an architecture firm in Virginia Beach. It was rest in peace, Michael Barnes, who was my the owner of the business, but also a great mentor of mine. He taught me about marketplace ministry and how I remember telling him I was like, man, I want to be a pastor. Of course, I'm new to the faith, so who that's what you think. If you speak pretty well and whatever, everybody's like, oh
Right.
boy, you're gonna be a pastor. So I thought
Yeah.
that was the path for me. So I told him, I said, I want to be a pastor. And he said to me, he said, Brian, we don't need any more pastors on pulpits. We need pastors who are architects, engineers, and lawyers and doctors and, the like. And he introduced me to marketplace ministry. He showed me Jesus was very rarely in the temple. Most of
Right.
what he did was in the market, literally in the marketplace. And this was a
Right.
thing that we shared, that we talked about all the time, was
Right.
marketplace ministry. So DC college was where I learned it and started applying it in terms of like relating to people, getting to know
Right.
people at raw basis, not at religion, but at raw basis of humanity and communicating to people's hearts and living amongst people. Um,
Yeah. Listen, I want you to keep going, but I wanted to emphasize even your use of the term community because since we're talking and what's peppered in our conversation is faith, right? A person immediately might think when you use the term community, a building and like church and going to a place that has a steeple on it and things of the sort. Back in the day, it had mahogany pews and all of that, right? But that's not really what you're speaking about. You're speaking about this education that came from this premise that Mr. Barnes laid, but it was something we were doing executionally, right?
mhm,
Because on that campus, we were building communities with people, whether we
mhm,
went to a church or a building with a steeple or not. We were just dwelling and living with people and engaging them and relating to them right where they were, right?
mhm,
But bringing our faith and our principles and our standards and the belief systems that we stand in are all agreed upon to whatever space and place we were in, right?
mhm.
And then doing life with those people every day and encouraging them. We brought that to our jobs. We
Yeah.
brought that to wherever we were doing recreation. Listen, I told a story about how me and my wife met. Well, you were mentioned in that story.
Mhm.
This is the gentleman that that told me that, hey, when you get to this job, it's going to be a lady there and you're going to like her. All
Yeah.
right. And well, I told the story on how I brought my faith and my gifts and things like that to the job and ministered to my wife,
Mhm.
not knowing she would become my wife. And look at us now, right? It's
Mhm.
bringing who we are to every environment and knowing how to build true community, true friendship, true
Mhm.
connection
Mhm.
to the lives of people, no matter where we are, right?
Yeah.
But continue, man. So you gained the insight about the perspective and the model of operating, right, from mentors and others, but we were able to executionally practice it on the college campus, right?
Yeah.
And then you took the spirit of that to DC and the places that you know worked and different things and impacted that and took that by storm. Tell us more about that.
So, man, by the grace of God, I was able to work, go into a profession, go into a job and work in a marketing department at a company. And while there, man, like I saw a transformation happen in the lives of people through the power of Jesus Christ. And when I saw that, I knew that God had a desire to touch creatives. And I ended up having a dream. I won't go into the dream, but the dream was an instruction to move to LA and to impact the life of creatives. And I called my wife and I told her, "Hey, I believe we're supposed to be in Los Angeles." She was like, "What?" She's like, "Let me pray on that." So I forgot. It's not like I forgot, but it just wasn't in my mind. So I guess she's praying them, but she's not saying anything about it. Maybe like a month later, I'm walking through the living room and I'm walking past her, I think into the kitchen, and she says, "Yes." And I'm like, "Yes, what?" She said, "Let's move to LA." Now, I didn't realize it, but she had been having dreams. Every message that she heard was pointing in the direction of LA. Everything was pointing in the direction of LA. And it was just heavy in her spirit, LA. So not long after that, she actually was able to transfer a job. And, by that point in time, I had been freelance photography for a while. So I wasn't beholden to anybody. So we moved to LA. And wow. That's a very long story on moving to LA because LA's got some stuff with it. But we have had, let me put it to you like this. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. We have pleased God because the amount of faith that is taken to not only, I was literally just thinking about it, just the goodness of God this week. About how we came here and all we had was, I shipped a car and all we had was some stuff in some suitcases and some stuff in my and it was a coupe in the coupe, right? And we've gone from that to, man, our lives have touched so many people, have touched so many corporations, oh man, like the impact that God has allowed us to have through obedience is ridiculous. Like it, in many ways, it's unfathomable.
Okay, imagine having a friend that does not truly see you and they can't fathom what you're doing, why you would do it, what's leading you to do it. As you're ebbing and flowing through the things that come along with living a life of faith and stepping out on something that, may seem crazy, right? Having a so-called friend that doesn't have not only the faith, but they don't even have the counsel to be able to stand with you in the adversity of all that was going to come along with making such a bold action, right? And they just don't have the makings to walk with you through those seasons and times. Now, listen, I'm biased to me, right? But, I know what type of friend I've been, right? In contrast to have a friend that, like you said, doesn't see you and define you by what you do, but defines you by knowing who you are and how who you are is going to be expressed in what you do. So therefore, they can fathom why you would make a certain move. They
Mm-hmm.
can fathom what you're bringing to new environments and spaces and places. They can fathom how, well, what you do is going to have to be blessed and
Yeah.
going to have to prosper
Yeah.
because of who you are.
Yeah.
And being able to speak to who you are, bring counsel to who you are, bring counsel to the circumstances that you may go through
Yeah.
while things are ebbing and flowing, but
Yeah.
continuing to push you to the higher version of yourself and the highest version of all that should pertain to life and godliness and your prosperity to get to that higher version of yourself, no matter what the circumstance of the day would look
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's how a friend really is built for adversity,
100%.
right? You know, when you run into that moment that doesn't look like a thing, but that friend can see past the moment.
Yeah.
And they can say, oh, no, I see this, I see that. But also when you run into something that's going to get you off of the path
Yeah.
of what you're headed to,
Like, hey, don't
they
do
can
that.
say,
That'd be not.
hey, don't
that'd
do
be
that
9 to
right
10.
there that I see.
Yeah.
You know, once again, I'm speaking to myself, but there's been many times that though I'm not physically present in LA, Brian will tell me things and I can say, hey, I sense this with this situation. I sense this with this person. You know, I sense this with this here. And I'm not even physically there, but the counsel, the wisdom, the insight, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I've shared on this pod that I have a certain set of gifts, right? So those things are able to, with long vision, almost physically be present in LA, though I'm not present. And the consistency of the council helping to continue push towards who you really are and who you're really purposed and called to be.
Yeah.
And the same goes, right?
Yeah.
There's been so many seasons that like you've been the voice of counsel. And you know, the person able to stand with me and give me perspective, man, and you know, just help me walk through like so many ups and downs and things like that, and just bringing like just the love and the acceptance too, right? You know, I just did a Father's Day podcast and had another great man on that podcast, and we were just talking about like how critical it is for men, and in particular Black men, to have, you know, relationships of acceptance and transparency and encouragement. And the gentleman that was on that podcast talked about needing someone who can speak to the king that's in you, right? No matter what the circumstance is.
Yeah.
It's so critical, man. It's necessary for our health, right? Yeah. So, man, talk more about coming into LA, you know, the different seasons of life. You know, I've watched you make that bold step. You've watched me make many bold steps too. And yeah, we're both still along the journey.
Yeah.
But with all the transitions, right? You've already laid out faith being so critical, right? Counsel being so critical, right? Transparency being so critical. You know, as you're continuing to evolve, man, what are some of the other critical pillars that really, because the titling of this this pod is Friends, the family that you choose, right? You know, what are some of the critical elements that were inside of the original choosing of this relationship, but the continual choosing of the relationship that has really made the relationship a true brotherhood and true family? Because let me say this, and I'll shut up and let you jump into this. I mean, a true friend is sometimes, you know, you mentioned scripture. Well, there's a scripture that says that there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Yeah.
Right? There are times that, you know, sometimes your family is not those that have your blood, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's not to minimize or negate those that do have your blood, but I mean, it's something extra special when you have a friend that doesn't have your blood, but they're a true brother. They're a true family, right?
Yeah.
You know, what's been some of those critical elements that were the building blocks and the foundational pillars of that?
Yeah. There's a obedience. And I think sometimes people don't realize how important it is that you stay on the path. Earlier today, there was a young man who's here, who's going through some things. And I was telling him, because there's another gentleman who's been like there for him. And I was telling him, I said, hey, he's here for you, but imagine if he had not make the right decisions, how it would have impacted your life.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes a person your brother, particularly as a believer, is children listen to their fathers.
Yeah.
And the thing that unites us as brothers is that obedience, is staying close to the Father. You said it earlier. You said there would be times where you would be down or I would be down, but it was always like, right? And you would, like the Bible says, woe unto him who falls alone, because he won't have anybody to pick him up, right?
Right.
Well, in catching your brother, that mean that brother ain't too far away for you to be able to grab him. The thing about disobedience, it will bring you so far out that no one will be able to grab you sometimes.
Right.
And though there's been times where we've in our youth would go astray, we would never go but so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that obedience and that sonship to God was the core element of our Constitution and our agreement, right?
Yeah.
And then even think about it. I mean, someone that's hard-headed and is not going to listen to what you're saying, it doesn't matter what you say to them, right?
Yeah.
But I think what's been the strongest building block and pillar of our relationship, it's not that we're listening to each other. We're listening to the God in each other,
Exactly.
right? And because we're both people who highly reverence and honor God, and we're trying to live a life that's submitted to something higher than us in God, right? And we're giving ourselves to the principles of God. Well, when each other speaks godly principles to each other, well, that's what we submit to, and that's what we're always listening for when we're talking to each other, to say, oh man, well, he just gave me, that was godly counsel, like that was right from God. And that's going to point me to the health and the highest version of myself by receiving godly counsel, right? And we're blessed by sitting under godly counsel. The Bible says that in the midst of counsel, there's safety, right? So our ability to bring counsel and keep each other in the safe places of godly wisdom that points us towards our highest version of ourselves has always been a health. And that's how we also know who should continue the journey along with you, right?
Yeah.
You have those that may come in seasons, and, you build bonds and connections and things of the sort. But over courses of time, there's always this recalibration of your principles and your morals and your standards and your constitution and the thing that you are in agreement about, right? And what I've really been able to cherish is our continued agreement to obedience to higher principles and higher counsel and wisdom from God. And then therefore that's what we bring into the conversations, right? And we've always been able to relate, whether we're just kicking it and tripping out and having fun. We're talking about, you name it, whether it's hip hop or, you talked about like being into the arts and all the type of stuff, man. We relate on all those facets, but then in the middle of those same conversations, we can go into something really deep, spiritual. We can speak to the emotional sides of life, right? Relational sides of life. I mean, we help each other in our marriages and all those types of things, right? Imagine, doing an endeavor as serious and critical as marriage and having a friend that doesn't honor it like you do, right? Having a friend that doesn't understand the ebbs and the flows of it and the different facets of marriage, and they don't have the wisdom and counsel to be able to speak to those ebbs and flows. Imagine a friend that doesn't see that being a man that is faithful to his marriage and that really values legacy isn't the lens by which he sees you, and therefore doesn't hold you accountable to that, right? Is that person really your friend, right? They're not, right? And, once again, I'm coining in a constitution. It was like this agreement that, we made very early about our sets of principles. And, you talked about what it is. You talked about it being kingdom, right? Building the kingdom of God, advancing God's kingdom, his influence, his government, and his culture, and whatever spheres we are in. And and we have different gifts and talents and things like that, but that's that core tenet, and it helps us to build whatever the endeavors are. If we're literally trying to build businesses or different investments and things, but it also informs how we build relationships with people and build
Mm-hmm.
community with others and things like that. And because that's what's at the center, man, I've been able to perpetually be a part of your communities, even though you're on
Mm-hmm.
the other side of the country, man.
Mm-hmm.
You've been able to be a part of my community,
Mm-hmm.
with me being on the other side of the country, and we just seamlessly like integrate into each other's
Mm-hmm.
lives and circles and networks and
Mm-hmm.
things like that because of that core tenet, man.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what,
Yeah.
man? Going back to the obedience factor. Something I cherish about our relationship is, the Bible says that only a fool rejects correction.
Mhm.
We have not rejected each other's correction,
Yeah.
no matter how it felt. Now, we might not have responded to it immediately, right? At least on my
Yeah.
part, I'll say that, right?
Yeah.
But there was no rejection.
Yeah. And and then you talked about like you maybe not responding to it quickly. I'm more the type to respond quickly, but the response isn't always good. You know? But we always come back,
Yeah,
full
yeah.
circle.
We always come
Yeah,
back, man. But yeah, because I think that's the most beautiful thing, man. Like, if
yeah,
because what it comes down to is one of the powerful things of time is time allows you to be able to see a person's character over time. And when you
hmm,
see that person's character over time, even when a person says something or does something, you won't judge them by what they did or what they said. You judge them by the constitution of their character over time.
hmm,
And you're able to say, you know what? They were correcting me, and maybe they said it in a way that may have been a little, what have you. But
yeah,
based on their character over time, I know that correction was for my best,
right,
because I know that they wouldn't say anything that to harm me or to hurt me, you know?
right, right. Man, that goes so many directions too, man. That also empowers you with the grace you need to have for people when you know their character too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when you have a brother that makes a mistake, because we all do, like
Mm-hmm.
a friendship that spanned 20 years. Of course, there's been mistakes
Mm-hmm.
made and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you know a person's character,
Mm-hmm.
you can forbear, right?
Yeah.
And you can say, oh man, my man is a little off right now, but I know his character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna give him the grace, man. I'm gonna show
Yeah.
him the love. I'm gonna forgive even,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm gonna stick in this, man, and keep
Mm-hmm.
pointing him to who he really is. He keeps pointing me to who I really am,
Yeah.
man. I want to talk about I want to even talk about forgiveness
Yeah.
in relationships, and then I want to get some of your last thoughts on like what encouragement, what guidance, what counsel you would give people on the relationships they may have around them now, and how things they need to take into great consideration on building the right communities
Mm-hmm.
and choosing those friends that can be family, right? So
Yeah.
let's first hit talking about forgiveness, man, and how
Mm-hmm.
that's so critical in relationships, and then talk about the communities that can become family and some jewels we can leave the people with, man.
Yeah. Well, you have to have grace for people. Period. You're flawed. They're
Yeah,
flawed. Right?
yeah,
Now there is a measure though, right?
mm-hmm,
Like, don't put yourself in a place to where you're being abused. Because I
right,
think sometimes um put themselves in a space to where, there's the 70 times 70 rule. How many times should you forgive them, right? The question is,
right,
how many times should you trust them?
mm-hmm,
Because forgiveness and trust are two different things,
mm-hmm,
you know? But the other side of that is some friendships are seasons, and some friendships they're built to last, you know?
right.
And
I think the key in that is that premise of Constitution, which comes out in the character of the person, right? I think is a thing that where when you get to a point where you and a person are no longer walking in agreement when it pertains to the Constitution of the
There you go.
standards that you live by, right? That's when I think forgiveness should be available. You know, you shouldn't harbor, but you talked about trust, right? I think the elements of trust and friendship is really about intimacy, right? I mean, a lot of times when men are talking, you know, you don't hear the terms of intimacy used, but all relationships really have levels of intimacy. Some relationships have zero intimacy. And then other relationships, there's true intimacy because, you know, people are able to be their most authentic self. They're able to be transparent. They're able to be unveiled and not hide, you know, the truths of where they are in their spirit and their mind and all that type of thing, emotionally and all of that. And a person should have access to you to the degree that there is an agreement on a set of standards and principles and, you know, moral compass and all that. And like I said, a constitution. And that doesn't mean that you agree on every single thing, but there's a guidepost, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, at the point in which there is no longer agreement about that constitution is where, while you may, you know, should forgive moments of discretion, you know, or moments to where, you know, there may be violations, right? That doesn't mean that, you know, the same access of trust should always be there, right?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And then when it pertains to building communities, man, you know, I feel like we're in a day that, you know, relationships are so critical.
Yeah.
They're so important. But there's so many new ways people are building relationships, you know, virtually, different environments and ethos. You know, what jewels would you leave, you know, people with about really their selection process on those friends that can truly be family? How important is community for your overall health? And, you know, what would you leave the people, man?
It's okay. I'm sure there have been several studies, but I saw this study that talked about why people tend to die early. And one of the number one causes of death is for older people, like are broken hips or broken legs. And this is going to sound weird even going this direction. But the reason being is if you break a hip or you break something in your leg, your level of sociability declines. So oftentimes when you see older people and they lack mobility, their mortality rate is is deeply skewed. So
it not only injures their mobility, but it injures their sociability. Yeah, sociability. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So sociability is extremely important. Now, there are measures because you have extremes and you have, right? So I'm an extremely social person, right? But it's not because it's my nature to be extremely social. It's because it's my call to be extremely social. Because by nature, I'm like a one friend person by nature, you know? But by call, I have to go way beyond just having one friend, right? So psychiatrists say that you can only go up to 20 relationships. I'm probably about and I'm talking about like close relationships. I'm probably at like, Jesus, it's a lot. I'm probably at like 40 plus.
Yeah.
You know, while we've been sitting here, my phone's been going off and people have been calling, you know?
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. So yeah, like there's a grace that's been placed on my life to be able to handle a lot of relationships. I have the bandwidth. I don't always have the time, you
Yeah.
know? But it's extremely important that you are relational. You have to be, you have to figure out your time in doing so, you know?
Yeah.
But it's extremely important. For me, it's been everything because it's giving me purpose. It's giving me a reason to get up. It's giving me I went through deep depression at one point in time. It was when everybody left Virginia and I was the only one
Yeah.
there. And, you know, I was
Yeah.
in the grad section of my degree. And yeah, man, I didn't realize how important it was to have y'all around, you know?
Right. Right.
And essentially, man, my mind just got, phew, it was bad. I found myself on the couch. Uh, I wouldn't even go up to my room. So I understand the importance of being able to relate to people, but then there's the other side of it. I also understand the importance of rest. I'll give you an example. This last 3 weeks has been back to 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 back person and counseling and walking people through stuff. This morning I didn't wake up until I think it was like 10:30 when I woke up because my body just, so just as important as it is for you to be able to relate and to have community, it's also important for you to have time away because even Jesus rested.
Yeah. But you know what? I think that, in the mention of Jesus, Jesus had different friends and
Mm-hmm.
his disciples, there were different
Mm-hmm. The
dimensions
inner
of
circle.
connection and all that. And I think the graces that's on the lives of your friends, you have those that, number one, will understand the grace that's on the life of a person like yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
We earlier talked about so-called friends that hold you prisoner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when a person really knows you, they encourage you to be all that you're purposed to be. So imagine if
Exactly.
I was a friend that would say, "No, Brian, you can only be my friend," right? Could you
Yeah, yeah,
imagine,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But no, I'm the type of friend that I see the grace that's on
Yeah,
you, and I see
yeah,
your purpose. I
yeah.
see, who you're really purposed to be. So I'm pushing and
Mm-hmm.
encouraging you and participating
Mm-hmm.
in your grace,
Yeah,
right? But then the powerful thing is, well, that grace has served, fueled me, and refueled me
yeah,
at times.
yeah,
And then my grace serves and fuel and refuels you
yeah.
at times, right?
100%.
So, it's one thing to have a so-called friend that they're draining you, right?
Yeah,
So when you need those moments away, of course, you take your isolated time,
yeah,
but there are levels of friends that, yeah, when you pull away from the all the crowds,
yeah,
and then you're really in that moment where it's like, oh man, I need a friend that, like, man, just the exchange of who we are as people, the
yeah,
exchange of our spirits, right?
yeah,
How we support each other even emotionally, but the
yeah,
counsel and the gifts and the grace
yeah,
that's on our lives, it's refueling to each other, man.
yeah.
It's powerful.
You know
The
what?
one,
Hey,
go ahead.
before you hit that next point, I want to say this because it's a thing that helped me a lot, and my wife and I, we counsel a lot of people, and it's it's a flaw that we tend to see within relationships in terms of expectations. So, because you just said something, and it brought back the scripture of a friend who sticks closer to their brother, right? But
Yeah.
also, you just spoke about Jesus, and essentially Jesus had his circle and he had an inner circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this concept called high, mids, and lows. We talk about it all the time, Joe. High, mids, and lows. It is important that you put your relationships into high, mids, and lows, and I'll explain highs, mids, and lows. Highs are your the people who pour into you. When I say pour into you, I mean from a mentorship space, right?
Right.
Your mids are the people that you both pour into each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are your the people you go to war with, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your lows. The lows are the people who you mentor and disciple you pour into.
Yeah.
And the reason it's important is because Many reasons, but I'll give you one reason. The level of expectation that you put on people. I often find that when people find themselves in deep level of disappointment, it's because, not always, but oftentimes it's because they've taken a person that's really supposed to be a mentor or a low, and I'm not calling them low as in they're bad, but just level wise, relationally, and they've taken that person and they've put them oftentimes in the mid space.
Yeah.
Now your level expectation on your mids is higher than your lows. So now the person that you should be discipling, and oftentimes this happens because we just really want friends.
Right.
And then oftentimes people are attracted to people that need them more than people that they need. And that's a complex. I'll put it to you like that.
Yeah. I mean, you're really, in my opinion, talking about a high level of intelligence and discernment.
Yes.
Right. And emotional intelligence and all of that, because, sometimes you go out the door and you intentionally make friends, but sometimes things just happen to you. You encounter people, but it's your ability to perceive and discern and truly see the person. You then can discern the nature of the relationship, right? Like I'll even, I want to stay on center to what you're saying, but I even had to learn this in a professional space, for example, to give a good example of this, right? In the professional space, a lot of times people get confused the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. And those are two different things, right? Now, often we really think we want a mentor. A mentor is someone that they want to give into you and they don't really want anything back from you. They get some type of intrinsic value from pouring into you. Maybe they see themselves in you and they just feel enriched by contributing to you and giving into you. But often those mentors don't have an opportunity or a door that they're going to actually hand to you or give to you. Although they may have power, they may not have a position of power for them to then open a door for you to go through, right? But then a sponsor is something totally different. And we need to be able to perceive sponsors, and we need to know how to interact with a sponsor once we encounter them, right? A sponsor often is a person that they're in a position of power. They have doors, opportunities, and avenues to get to spoils and things that you may want and need, right? But there's a value exchange expected in that relationship, right?
Yeah.
And for them to then open the door and sponsor you into an opportunity, well, they're doing it because there's something very specific that they want from you.
Yeah.
And that's a value exchange. And we'll expect some of those people to just be a mentor, someone who's just going to give into you with no expectation. We expect that person to be as friendly as a mentor would be. But it's a different relationship. And the difference is all anchored on our ability to perceive and to discern, right? So similarly, in our exchanges day to day, we meet a person and we expect them to be our horizontal friend.
Yeah.
No, sometimes you need to, by perception, say, oh man, even if this person is my age, even if this person is younger than me, they have something on them that I need to receive from them. And we need to be able to get into the posture to receive and put the relationship in its proper place, to put the respect on the relationship, put the honor on the relationship so that we then can receive all that person has to offer, right? And then those friends that can walk with you and see all the sides of you and add value to all the different facets, then yes, that can be a horizontal friend. But then there's people that, there's something on the inside of you that you have to offer that will enrich that person. And it was never intended for them to be a peer that walks with you all the time, but someone who you contribute to, and you need to be able to perceive that. And often we'll end up abusing relationships, meaning placing too much of a demand on someone and overstaying our welcome and everything in relationships, that we should have went into that relationship and allowed ourselves to be vessels to contribute to a person and then know when it's time to exit stage, right? Or to keep the relationship in its right context and the right boundaries, right? And all that type of thing. Now, let me say this too. even with the horizontal friends, and I think our friendship has been a great example of that. Well, we teeter into all these
Yep.
things because
Absolutely.
there are moments to where, although you're my friend, because I put respect on your name, your gifts, your talents, the grace that's on your life. Well, I know when you're in your thing. I know when you have tapped into that higher level of Brian, and I know how to get in a posture to say, "Oh, I'm going to receive from that in this moment." Right? I put honor and respect on you as a friend. Because of who you really are, right? I see you with a higher lens, through the lens of God, and I know when I'm tapping into that part of you, and I'll sit and I'll receive from you in that moment. And then we go right back to interacting, and you do the same with me.
Exactly.
There's moments I tap into that higher version of Joe, right? And you know how to put honor and respect on that, and value on it, and draw and place a demand on that, and it's highly enriching to one another, man. And I think every person should have the type of friendship that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I feel sorry for any person who doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? Man, this has been my man, Be Free. Like, I don't think there's a better person to have had this conversation. A friend that is the family that I've chosen, right? The friend, the family that you choose. You know, all the facets of how relationship is enriching. Man, I just really hope that, you know, the nuggets and the jewels that we have laid out today, man, are a benefit to people, and they're able to have friendships that, first of all, are built on an agreed kind of like constitution and moral compass and standards of living and things of the sort. But relationships that are transparent and open. There's a level of intimacy there, even with men, right? And relationships that people can hold each other accountable, right? Throughout seasons, and not judge each other from righteous purchase, but judge each other through the lens of who we are really called to be and purpose to be, and keep pointing each other to that, right? And that being on the foundation of that agreed compass. And ideally that compass is a relationship with God and the principles of his kingdom, right? But then being able to walk with each other through the ebbs and flows of the different seasons of life, man, and be a true brother in adversity, whether that's adversity between each other, or adversity that we go through in life, and having a friend that can stand with you, right? And then being one that even in the seasons where, you know, we may trespass against each other, man, we forgive because we know each other. We know the character and the fabric of the friend, right? And the man and the woman that's in our life. We know the fabric of that person, and we're able to have grace for them, right? And but still be open, transparent, and pull each other's chain when we need to, man. All right. Hey, man, Be Free, bro. First of all, love you, bro.
Love you, bro.
I want to thank you for being here with the Parafam, man. Is there any parting words you want to give to the people? We're going to, of course, put your social and all that up there, man. How can the people get in contact with you? What do you got going on? And what parting words do you want to leave the people, man?
Let's see. People are Earth's greatest resource. Value people. Be wise, but value people.
Man, wise words from a wise man, one of the wisest men that I know, man. Thank you, Be Free, once again for being with us. Para family, man, this has been another one. This will not be the last time you will see this man. And there's so many jewels that I've been able to benefit from the life of this man over the last 20 years. And hey, man, I think you deserve to get some of them jewels too. You feel me? All right, man, we're going to sign off. Peace. Next time, grace and peace to you.
Peace.